Okay, guys, let's take a look at our third example of projectile motion, quadratic functions. We have an apple that's dropped 8 feet from an apple tree. Let's write a quadratic model to model this. Now, because it was just dropped and it was not thrown or launched, there is no velocity. And we're going to use the negative 16 because we're talking about feet. So the height with respect to time is going to be negative 16 times t squared plus 8. So we have no linear term. Let's talk about what the y-intercept represents. The y-intercept, which is right here, represents the initial height of the object. What does the vertex represent? Well, the vertex happens to also be our y-intercept. The vertex represents the maximum height and how long it took to get to that maximum height. So for this apple, it took 0 seconds because it started at 8 feet. The zeros, we have 2 zeros. This represents when the apple is on the ground. Well, this 0 is going to be irrelevant. And our second 0 is going to represent how many seconds it takes for that apple to hit the ground when it is 0 feet off of the ground. Our initial height of the apple is 8 feet. What is the maximum height? Well, it's also 8 feet. Then it says, how high is the apple when it has fallen in 3 seconds? So we want to know the height in 3 seconds. So we plug in our time. And notice we are going to get a negative value. And so when we multiply negative 16 times 9, we get negative, and we add 8 to it, we get negative 136. We cannot have a negative height. This indicates to us that the apple has already landed on the ground before 3 seconds. How many seconds will it take to reach the maximum height? So normally we would be looking at our vertex and doing negative b over 2a, but we know that the apple started at its maximum height in 0 seconds. Now we need to know how many seconds will it take for the apple to land. So we're looking for this value here. So I'm just going to use the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times 8 over 2 times a. So we're still going to have our plus or minus. We're going to have 0 squared, which is 0. And then we have a negative times a negative. So we're going to have a positive radicand. So we're going to multiply 4 times 16 times 8. And that gives us 512 over negative 32. So we're going to have a negative. So let's take the square root of 512. This gives us about, I'm going to round to the 10th, 3.5. And then we would have the positive 3.5 over negative 32. So 3.5, again, we're rounding, so it's not exact. Negative 3.5 divided by negative 32 gives us 0.11. I'm going to round 0.11 seconds. So that apple is not in the air for very long. And then here we will get a negative value. We would get the negative 0.11. So that would be this root, and this one is irrelevant.